couple people that are in here that are in local government that I failed to do at the beginning. We've got two people here from the Johnson County Commissioners. There's Commissioner Jason Osterhaus back here in the back, and Commissioner Michael Ashcraft over here on the other side. Yeah, there he is. Are there any other elected officials in here that I missed? And if I did, I apologize. Who am I missing? Oh, Mr. Denny, how are you, sir? Nice to see you from the Shawnee Mission School Board. And I wonder if I might have either Commissioner Ashcraft or Commissioner Osterhaus offer to be Phil Donahue for the question section, where you can run around with the microphone so that we can hear this. What I would ask for the question is we'll have Commissioner Osterhaus recognize you. He'll come to you with the mic. Please tell us who you are and who your question's addressed to, and that way we can get through this fairly efficiently. Let me see time-wise how we're doing here. Okay, we have about 30 minutes, and then we've got to be out of here. My understanding is there's a wedding reception or something later on here that they're going to want to clear out for. So we've got about 30 minutes. Start right here in the front.
Tim Golda, my name, R-Lenexa. Question for Lance, since he's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and I came in late, so you probably have to mention part of this, maybe two questions. First one, dealing with the constitutional amendment with the Supreme Court. It's my understanding in the House there are some members that may not pass. That's true. That's what I'm hearing anyway. There may not be enough votes to get passed. Do you know who they are? And so can you send me the list or give me a call later? Okay. I can't understand why we won't go with that. Second one, the meeting you had the other day when you had Steve Howe and the AG's office come up and testify. Can you explain, did anybody ask former AG Six to come up and testify? And to me, there's a problem there. And I don't know if anybody had asked him to come, if not, why.
Sure. Well, two things on that. I did talk a little bit about where we're at on Judicial Selection 4, and happy to talk to you more about that offline. We are hopeful. I think there is a path forward to get to 84 votes. I shared a little bit of detail about that, but let's communicate offline on that since I already kind of addressed it. The other issue, to give some context for that, we did have an informational hearing in Judiciary Committee on Thursday, and many of you may have followed in the news media the fact that there was a criminal case that was pending for some time in Johnson County that involved alleged criminal conduct by Planned Parenthood. And District Attorney Howe, at a point in that prosecution with respect to certain felony charges, ended up dismissing those charges because written evidence, documents that were in the evidence room at the Attorney General's office were missing. I believe they were shredded. And the question of how that happened, why that happened, has been a matter of great public concern. We asked both the Attorney General's office, under Attorney General Schmidt at this time, and District Attorney Howe to come in and provide some information to the committee essentially on two things. Number one, we asked that the District Attorney explain to us what was the nature of these records, why did you need them, how do you know that they were where you say they were and that they were destroyed, and what was the impact of this on your ability to prosecute your case. The second thing we asked then was for the Attorney General's office to respond to us with respect to their take on what had occurred and what remedial action, if any, had been taken since that time. I won't try to reiterate what District Attorney Howe said, except to say there's a very clear chain of custody that shows these documents being signed for by a KBI agent from the judge who had them in Topeka into the evidence room in the Attorney General's office. We now know, after multiple folks have torn that evidence room apart, that they are not there. How evidence in the evidence room at the Attorney General's office can disappear without knowing who removed it, on whose authority, and for what purpose is a huge issue of public policy interest. The fact that the case happened to involve an issue that's somewhat controversial to some degree is, in terms of just the narrow issue of how can this happen, is really beside the point. Regardless of what the issue is, this is a problem. And so the thing that was probably most stunning to me, and I've been interacting behind the scenes with the Attorney General's office for some time, there was a criminal investigation that took place by the Sheriff of Shawnee County, in which the Sheriff did not interview anybody from District Attorney Howe's office. That gives you a sense of the legitimacy of that investigation. But that having been said, that largely concluded the possibility of any kind of criminal action being taken. But there's still the question of how did this occur and how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? Well, based upon concerns about this, the Attorney General implemented an evidence working group that has met for a matter of months, and they implemented a series of extremely extensive reforms. Now, it's stunning that the Attorney General's office would need extremely extensive reforms in their evidence retention process, since that's really a core function of that office. The person who came over from the office spoke to us at pretty great length about the things that they were doing, and there was one little phrase, and then I'll answer the punchline of your question. There was one little phrase that really caught me, and that was this. He was describing what I thought were very normal course. We have a person who's responsible for the evidence room. We have an attorney who's responsible for answering any kind of questions that come up. We have a process for making sure that any time evidence leaves the evidence room, that there's not just a person who's accountable, but a second person who's accountable, that the person who brings the evidence in is not the same person who signs it in. So just things that seemed very, very normal course. And he said these were new concepts within the Attorney General's office with respect to maintaining evidence. That's very concerning. On the other hand, it is good that the Attorney General's office has taken this matter very seriously. The question of attempting to reach back and ask for folks from the prior administration, whether it's Attorney General Six himself or others, to come forward. In all candor, our sense of that, and maybe this is a bad assumption on my behalf, perhaps we should just ask and see what they say. And that's actually not a bad idea. Given the information that came out in the sheriff's investigation, what occurred there, the fact that we have that information, that's basic. What they're going to say, what they claim occurred, is in essence a matter of public record. I don't really have an objection to asking them to come in again. They would probably decline, and we don't have subpoena power, at least at this point, to do it. But my feeling was, because we do have the sheriff's investigation, we can look at that. We know what people within the Attorney General's office at that time say occurred. What I will say, it didn't seem to me that having them come in to essentially say the same thing would be that beneficial. But that, that was just a judgment call on my part, the reason for doing it that way. I guess that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm Barbara Casey. I'm a teacher in Shawnee Mission and a active member of Shawnee Mission NEA. And I was a little surprised, and I was hoping that maybe each of you will address education funding and how we're going to continue to fund our schools in light of the governor's proposed Light to Zero, what your stance is on the sunset of the sales tax, and how you plan to vote on continuing that. But Senator Smith, I have a specific question for you. We've all heard you say that you do not want the representation of the NEA. You do not believe in collective bargaining rights for teachers, but yet you benefit from our negotiations and the work of the NEA. And specifically this year, you received a $1,000 stipend that was negotiated by NEA. You received a $677 step increase negotiated by NEA and a $72 health insurance benefit for a grand total of $1,749. Yet you do not want our representation. This is money you would not have received if we had not negotiated it. So I would like to ask you if you would be willing, we'll deduct for taxes, to write a check to the Shawnee Mission Educational Foundation for $1,100 to compensate the district for the benefits that we negotiated for you. Would you be willing to do that, Senator?
Well, first of all, I don't have benefits through the Shawnee Mission School District, so I didn't get a health benefit. So that's first. Secondly, as a school teacher, I am not a member of the NEA. That is a decision that I have made. That is my choice. I also have a choice on whether or not I agree with the contract. Even though I'm not a member of the NEA, I get to vote. I have consistently voted against the contract negotiated by the NEA every single year. However, I am stuck with whatever gets negotiated by the NEA. And just like anybody else, I have to make a living. And I give up half my pay to be in the legislature. I get no benefits, no pay from the Shawnee Mission School District during that time period. So I believe that I have already given back that money in that regard. And the money that I make in the legislature does not make up for the money that I lose when I am not teaching. Secondly, as far as the issue of school funding and the glide to zero, there are great concerns by the entire legislature over how we're going to do this, how it's going to work. And it's a work in progress. I am not on any of the budget committees that has anything to do with education, so I have no direct input on that particular subject. However, what I'm hearing is hopeful, and I see some things coming down the line, I think, that are going to be that are going to go well for education. We have several things that we have to look at. Everybody in this room, everybody sitting up here with me, everybody out here would agree that education is one of the primary functions of state government, and it's one of our most important functions. I think it's secondary only to, as Representative Hildabrand said, public safety. If you don't have a safe environment, it doesn't matter how good your schools are if you can't get to them. So public safety is number one, education is number two. After that, then we have to look out for those that can't take care of themselves. Constitutionally, those are basically the three things that we have to do. We have to provide for public safety, we have to provide funding for education, we have to provide for a mechanism for those that are mentally, physically disadvantaged and need the help of the state in order to be able to live a productive life. Those are the things that are actually spelled out in the Kansas Constitution that we have to take care of. Additionally, the other constitutional requirement we have is we have to pass a budget. Something the federal government hasn't done in over 4 years. But it's constitutionally mandated for us in the state. We can't go out and borrow money, we can't run a deficit, we have to live within our means. And that's what we're trying to do, and those are the things that we're working on. There's still a lot of work to be done. The budget discussion will come this second half, and I know that the people on Ways and Means and Appropriation are doing a lot of work on that, and I look forward to seeing that bill when it comes out of committee.
Yeah, Senator Smith, one thing quick to add, I know as being president of PTA, what a lot of parents do not understand is the state's responsibility to provide the money. What happens with the money after the state budgets for that is the responsibility of the school board. There's instances where we had Chief Johnson gave himself a $10,000 a year raise, and at the same time cut the pay for paras or froze their wages. We have a lot of children in this district that need paraprofessionals, and our paraprofessionals are underpaid and underappreciated. That needs to go to the school board, not the legislator. And I know in my conversations with school board members, they tell me
Marla, hey, we would prefer, I don't know about Representative Smith, but I would prefer that we just have questions and answers, because if everyone starts editorializing, this will become a nightmare.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, so I am on appropriations. We don't, as Senator Smith said, the final product isn't out yet. What has been passed so far through appropriations was exactly as it came to us. There's been no direct, as far as the Department of Education and all education spending, there hasn't been any adjustments made at this point. We'll see as things progress. And frankly, I'm suspect as far as the government's tax plan. So as far as that part of the question, I don't necessarily see that is going anywhere. So I mean, that's just my opinion and kind of how I view things as how they're functioning, but I don't necessarily see it passing.
A couple of points on taxes and spending, both at kind of the macro state level and for education. I think there's a lot of confusion about how much money the state is spending and where it's being spent. If I relied upon the Kansas City Star, I would presume that the impact of Governor Brownback on the state budget has been massive spending cuts. Well, here are the numbers. The last budget year before Governor Brownback, our state general fund budget was $5,666,000,000. In the year that we're in right now, our state general fund budget is $6,198,000,000. His first budget was $6,098,000,000, which was about a $430 million increase. If we would have spent, we're spending $532 million more in this budget year, state SGF, than we spent the year before Governor Brownback was governor, the last year before he came in. If we had kept spending the same as we did in FY11, if we came in and said, you know what, we're fiscal hawks. We're not going to cut anything. We're not going to have any SGF spending cuts. We're just going to spend the same as we spent in the last Parkinson budget. We would have spent $964 million less over the last 2 years than we've actually spent, and we wouldn't be having a debate over whether we could afford tax cuts. The money would be there. Now, one of the things, I'm not a big fan of President Obama, but one of the things I love when he says is that's not Republican, that's not Democrat, that's not left, that's not right, that's just math. Well, that's just math. And we have a spending problem, a massive spending problem in Kansas, and the numbers prove it. Now let's talk about K-12 spending. What did we spend in the last budget year before Governor Brownback was governor on K-12 education? $2,867,000,000 in state aid. What are we spending on state aid this year? $3,184,000,000. It's not Republican or Democrat, left or right, it's math. That's what we're spending, significantly more. Now that doesn't mean that for every school district the process is fair or even makes sense, and I want to give you an example of that. I represent 2 school districts, almost identical in size. Olathe has a student population of 26,373. It receives $174,539,000 in state aid. Shawnee Mission has 26,534 students this year, almost identical. It receives $116 million. $174 million for Olathe, $116 million for Shawnee Mission in state aid. The total amount that those 2 districts spend is about the same. Total expenditures for Olathe, $324 million. Total expenditures for Shawnee Mission, $328 million. But let's look at where that money comes from just in general. Let's just take 3 years ago, last year before Governor Brownback was governor. State aid to Olathe, $138 million. This year, $174 million. Federal aid, $28 million. This year, $15 million. Local revenue, $144 down to $134. So for Olathe, the Olathe part of my district, state aid has increased a lot. Federal aid's gone down, local aid's gone down. For Shawnee Mission, take the same 3-year period, and state aid's gone from $107 million to $116 million. Federal aid has dropped from $26 million to $18, and local revenues dropped from $200 to $193. Again, not Republican, not Democrat, not left, not right, just math. That's the spending, that's where the money's coming from, and there is a serious problem in the school finance formula. When you have a school finance formula that takes two school districts that border each other, that have within 30 students or so of the same number of students, and one's getting 116 million and one's getting 174 million, you've got a strange school finance formula. Now there are reasons for it. If you're a big school district that's getting bigger in Kansas, there are some benefits in the finance formula that if you're a big school district that's getting smaller, which is Shawnee Mission's circumstance, you don't get. And so I guess I would just say this. We're spending a ton of money on K-12 education. We're spending more now than we spent last year and more than we spent the year before. And we're probably going to spend at least as much, if not more, this year than we spent last year. But we spend it in a way that is not equitable, that is particularly disadvantageous to the Shawnee Mission School District. And as long as, and this is my final point here, as long as we continue to do the increase in state spending that you see here by pouring money into the base, it's not going to get better for Shawnee Mission. For Olathe, it's a little bit different. But for Shawnee Mission, putting money into the base is insane. And this school finance lawsuit that we have, at the end of the day, if they order us to spend $550 million more on K-12 education, that money is largely going to go into the base, and it will be a pittance for Johnson County school districts. It will not solve the problems that you're seeing at the local level. And so we have to reform the school finance formula. And that takes, I think, some honesty about what we're really spending, some honesty about where the inequities are, Shawnee Mission having the very best case for an inequitable system, and the ability then, not just to talk about it, but to put together coalitions with legislators in other parts of the state to get this solved. And so that, I think, Johnson County delegation is largely united on, and we're trying to accomplish that. But the school finance lawsuit does not help Johnson County's cause in that regard. In fact, it sets us back dramatically, because if these outstate school districts who get huge bumps when you put money into base aid because of the way the low enrollment weighting works and things like that, if they get their money out of this school finance lawsuit, why do they want to cut a deal with us to allow more local control? They've got theirs, we're getting a pittance. And so I think we have to be honest about the numbers, but we also have to be tactically smart about how we approach this if we're ever going to get the kind of local control that I think all of us, or most of us, would like to see in Johnson County. That's my take, and again, thank you all.
We got a couple in the back here, and then we'll get to you, Jim. Okay.
Well, good afternoon, and first, thank you so much to our representatives for giving up their Saturday mornings and afternoons to be here to help us become more educated about what's going on in Kansas. My question is for Representative Hildabrand. Representative Hildabrand, I follow you on Facebook and I read your newsletter, so I know that HB 2192 is something that you introduced and perhaps you're passionate about. So I would like to ask you to please explain what HB 2192 is and how it would impact or repeal HB 2145, and then what your motivations are for proposing this type of legislature. And more specifically, if you can tell us how that would impact dreamers that are currently benefiting from deferred action. And then also, I know we don't have time for that, so if you would please visit with us afterwards so that we can share a story with you of an undocumented student that is now a legal permanent resident and benefited from in-state tuition.
HB 2292 is the repeal of in-state tuition for illegal immigrants. This has been in place since, I want to say, 2004, and there may be those in the audience that can correct me on that. Basically what this is that those in the state of Kansas who are undocumented have the ability to receive in-state tuition rates the same as Kansas high school students. My problem with that is that a documented citizen of, say, the state of Missouri, or, you know, further away, Illinois, Kentucky, something like that, that wants to attend KU or K-State, has to pay a higher rate than a person living here in the state of Kansas without documentation. And so I feel that that is unfair to those citizens of other states who are looking to attend a Kansas school, and I believe it is unfair to the taxpayers of Kansas. The numbers I believe that I've seen recently is that there are approximately 600 students in the state of Kansas that are taking advantage of this in-state tuition for illegal immigrants, and so HB 2292 would repeal that current issue. I've also been told by the Secretary of State, Chris Kobach, that there is federal law that says that is illegal. So the state of Kansas has been in violation of federal law since 2004. So that is another reason that I would like to see HB 2292 passed.
I'm Earl Long from Overland Park. I'm a fair tax guy. The fair tax bill this year is House Bill 2355. Its primary feature is to get the taxpayers in Kansas and the corporations away from the federal income tax system because it is so evil and it is so corrupt. The primary feature of this bill is that it interferes with the billions of dollars now are going to the corporations with tax credits. They're paying very little in income taxes, and it returns that money to the taxpayers because we can adjust the tax sales rate to fit the amount of money that the government needs and can qualify for. Right now, that bill has been taken a look at by the it's in the tax committee right now on the House side. The governor's budget director has taken a look at it and said it's a good bill. It appears to be revenue neutral. It has also been taken a look at by the speaker, who says, if anything, it raises too much money. And so that's easily fixed. But right now, we don't, last year we had a hearing on this same bill and it died in committee. This year we introduced it earlier, and it's not even going to be heard in the committee. And I'd like to ask our congressional delegations to put pressure on the speaker and onto the tax committee to hear our bill, House Bill 2355, the fair tax bill. Hey. Thank you.
I think it deserves a hearing.
My question is and I've appreciated teachers all my life. I had a teacher save me from being in jail. There's 3 of us in the 6th grade, and 2 of my buddies were in jail. They've been in jail many times. And she got a hold of me and straightened me out. So I have a great respect for teachers. However, I've also been in sales for about 50 years. And the thing that I always, when I sell things, is that I would give value for money. In other words, if they're going to give me money, I'm going to give them something of value. I'm going to sell them a product or a service. And right now, and I don't blame the teachers, I blame the system. And I blame the State Board of Education, and I blame the State Department of Education, and some of the administrators of the school districts. We are not getting children coming out of our K-12 schools that can read and write and do anything. Well, now, she's shaking her head over there, but if you notice that the standards have been lowered twice since 2002, and the word proficient. The other thing is that when you look at the ACT, that's our seniors, when only 29% of them can pass all 4 segments of that, we have got to change the system, and money is not the thing. Tell me how we need to change it.
Well, I guess I'm on education committee, so I guess this question gets to go to me.
Could you stand up, please? We can't see you.
She was standing.
I'm short. I'm not sure standing is going to help you at all. that have been brought before our committee that are brought up every year. One of the things that I think that I have dug down into this year that is, I think, impacting education just across the board is, and this is, some people won't agree with this, but I think it's what our families look like. When I was going to school, there were, I think there was one student in my class that came from a broken home. So there was a nuclear families. There were many even at that time that were dual income families, but there was consistency at home. So there wasn't a lot of weekend visitations. There wasn't things that I think that were disrupting the student's life. And I think that that's played a major impact on where we're at educationally, and I think that that then impacts the day in and day out life of that student within a classroom. I was also talking to some friends last night just about, these are, I mean, there's probably everyone here, not everyone may know, but we homeschool. It's a choice that we made. I'm a former teacher, love education, love discussing education issues. My husband's a police officer, he works shift work. We found out in preschool that our kids didn't see daddy anymore. And it became a problem with how our family functioned. And so in order to work around that issue, we decided that we needed to do something non-traditional. And it's worked great for us. But I've got two little active boys, and they're wiggle worms. They're great. Many of you have seen them. I brought them to forums. I take them to meetings with me. They do great. But I also make sure that they have plenty of time for activity. So I've seen things that have happened within school systems that have taken away time for our kids to get their wiggles out. It's really hard for especially small children, in my opinion, elementary boys. And I want to talk boys specifically because another quote that I heard this week was, boys are not dysfunctional girls. They're different. They're just different. And they need activity. So when I'm working with my kids at home and we hit that ball where their wiggles have just interrupted their educational learning experience, we do something to get their wiggles out. We do something to get their energy out so that they can focus once more on learning. Because when you have that distraction, it's pretty difficult to get and dig into the task of learning. So some of the things that I think that we could do to impact just, if you want to talk specifically, boys, because I think that we've seen a decrease in the academic performance of our boys in the last 15, 20 years. We can talk about the more girls are going to college. That's awesome. It's fantastic. But we're having less boys go. We're talking about higher education degrees. Once again, we have females are leading the way. I think that's fantastic. I love to see achievement by females, but I also don't like to see that if that means that what's that happening to our male student and why. I guess I probably am not actually asking more questions than I'm answering, but because I think it's complicated. I don't think that there's an easy answer. But elementary-wise, I'd like to see more activity. I like to see us get some recesses back. Let's make sure that we have PE. Because without some of these basic things, I think it's really hard for our kids, not just boys, but also girls, to have the ability to focus within the classroom. And again, I think I point right back to our family situation and what that's doing to our students in the classroom. And honestly, I think that causes difficulty for our teachers too. Because, I mean, I can point to a circumstance when I was teaching. I had a student in which it wasn't just weekends that they were the custody. It was within the week. So every other day, we were back and forth between mom's house and dad's house, and homework was forgotten in one place, and then the other parent had to be responsible for trying to track down that homework. I mean, I think we've got some family dynamic issues that are coming into play, as well as just, functional things. I think it's a very, very complex problem, and I'm willing to have some really complex conversations about what we do, how can we address those issues, and what is the best way to move forward. So I'm not sure I really answered your question, but I'm not sure that there is a great answer to that question.
I'm Jean Goodman, and I've lived in Johnson County since I was 11. My husband's lived here his entire life. One of the questions I had, I don't think you guys answered, is the sales tax question, and are you going to support keeping that? And I had a question from my husband that he wanted me to ask, because we've emailed and I haven't gotten a response, and that's on the March to zero and the switching that emphasis off of income tax to replacing that income with other things such as higher property taxes, higher sales tax, and how that's going to affect the building business and the home ownership and those kinds of things. But specifically, the increase in sales taxes, I know that when you guys all ran for office, part of the reason why you got in was because of attacking the opponents for voting for that sales income tax. And so, are you going to support keeping it?
I'm on record for saying other is a 1.5 mils. It's a property that is property tax statewide that goes for building maintenance, both in the Regent system and in other state buildings. And that is the only property tax that's levied at the state level, period. There is no other. So it's 21.5 mils statewide that's levied, and those are the specific things that it goes to fund. So increases in property tax are local issues, other than those two things at statewide. The rest of them is a local issue. And I don't know that we're going to glide to zero. So I think I already was on record that I don't think that is, right now I don't think it has the support to pass. I could be wrong. There could be some changes. Things could impact that. And I, on my basis, could be off. But that's my understanding. And once again, I am on record. I do not support the sales tax increasing it or staying at the level it's at.
I'll echo most of that. Overall, I want to make sure that our taxes go down. If we are going to keep it at the same, if we're not going to allow the sunset to happen, then we've got to have something someplace else to make sure that overall taxes go down. But at this point, I think it's time for us to actually put a sunset in place that we promised, and that we can see that the legislature can actually sunset something that they said that they were going to sunset, because we have a bad habit of putting something in place saying it's going to sunset in 2 years, and then 2 years down the road, no, we're going to keep it in longer. And so I think just as a matter of principle, we need to sunset the tax and maybe look at it next year and see if a reduction in income tax can be balanced with an increase in the retail sales tax.
How about a termination of that income tax and leave a sales tax?
If we can get the fair tax through, I would be voting for that. So.
I do support the concept of the march to zero. I believe that the sales tax is the more fair tax. I don't know that I agree with the timetable. That I think that there may be more stabilization that needs to occur before we adopt the governor's timetable on that. So that would be my stand.
Well, I not only oppose the sales tax increase, I think those who were there can say in fairness that led the floor fight against it. And so I thought it was a bad idea at the time and anti-competitive. I think that the only justification for leaving it, or having it not roll off, is if we were to do something very dramatic, like a fair tax or a very quick end game in terms of march to zero. Leaving the sales tax on, but then having a march to zero that is 5 5 years out, something like that you really can't control, seems to me not to make a whole lot of sense. In candor, I don't think there are votes for anything right now in terms of taxes. I could be proven wrong tomorrow, but I just don't see it happening this year. I think we're going to be about where we are. That's my guess. That's not necessarily my preference. That's just prognosticating.
And I'll just finish up on that real quick. I campaigned when I ran for the House against the sales tax. I would love to see the sales tax go away. I too support the fair tax concept, however. So we need something, like Representative Kinzer said, something dramatic needs to happen if we're going to do that, rather than this long slope glide down. Bottom line, though, comes back to the other statement that you made, Lance. It's not Republican, it's not Democrat, it's numbers. And we have to make the numbers work, because that's the one constitutional duty we have, is to balance budget. And in order to do that, we have to have a tax